Stitch Sisters here, and today we are bringing you a brand new video, a tutorial on how to draft your own custom pencil skirt. Now we're doing this with a knit fabric, and it was inspired by a recent class that we taught at Sudbury Sewing School where everybody came along and made them out of scuba. Now the one that I'm going to show you today is also a scuba, but you could do this out of any knit fabric at all. You just need to make sure that it has at least 10% stretch in it so that it can fit over your hips. So this is the scuba that I'm using here. It's this lovely sort of terracotta tile effect, which I've seen lots of fabrics like this in the shops recently, so it's quite on trend. And the first thing that you want to do before you do anything else is just to check that which way the stretch goes on the fabric. So with all knit fabrics, there'll be more stretch one way than the other way, so it's worth just having a little test and giving your fabric a little stretch both ways. Usually the most stretch is between the selvages, which is the case with this fabric. And so we're going to take our fabric and we're going to fold it in half, bringing the selvages together. And then we actually want to make two folds. So we're then going to fold it in half again to create a double fold. So here we are, we folded the scuba twice, and as you can see I've actually pinned it down each fold just very loosely, and that's only because scuba is quite a spongy fabric. It's quite unruly, so for us to be able to treat all of the layers the same without them moving, I've gone ahead and pinned both of those folds. So before you can draft your skirt, you're going to need to take some measurements. I've already done that for Nikki because this skirt is for her. And coming up on the screen now is a list of the measurements that you will need to take. You will need your waist, you will need your hip, you will need the distance between your waist and your hip, and then you will need the length of the skirt. Now, if you haven't taken your measurements before, if you're unsure about how to do that, I'll pop a link up there, which will take you to a video that we've made before about how to take your measurements properly. So now we're going to transfer our measurements to the fabric. So the first thing that we need to do is to take a quarter of your waist measurement. So because this is a double fold, what we're drafting here is a quarter of your final size. So we need a quarter waist measurement. So I'm just going to take my quilting ruler, and out from the fold I'm going to mark a quarter waist, whatever that is for you. Next I'm going to take the difference between my waist and my hip, or Nikki's waist and hip in this case, and I'm going to mark that down. She's very tall, so she has a nice long waist to hip. And then I'm going to measure a quarter hip measurement from that point. Now I don't need to draw another line for that, I'm just going to make a mark. Then I'm going to actually mark the length of the skirt. So we decided on 31 inches for Nikki, so that is 24. So I need to add another 7. Which is there. Now when you're calculating your length, you will need to allow for a ½ inch at the top for your elastic, and you'll need a ½ inch at the bottom for hemming, so make sure you add an extra inch onto your length. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draft, it's up to you what the hem circumference is. I know that Nikki will want more of a tulip shape, she'll want it to come in at the bottom, so I'm going to go for somewhere between the waist and hip here. So I'm going to go for 8.5 inches and pop that there. So I can mark that one in, that's the hem, and now I can join the dots. Now it's literally as simple as connecting those ones on the outside. Now as you can see, that's a little bit angular, and that's not the shape that anyone really is.
I'm not that shape.
No. So there's a couple of things that you need to do first of all. One of them is just to smooth out that hip curve. Now you can, if you want to, grab a dressmaker's ruler or French curve to give you a nice smooth curve. In fact, I might have done it a bit too much there, so let me bring that in a tiny bit. But you can just freestyle it, and because it's on the inside, it doesn't matter if you have to do it several times, that'll be fine. The other thing that we need to do is just your body is not, your waist is not going to be completely straight like that, so we need to curve this to the body. So the way you do that is just using your ruler, bring this angle up, so I'm creating a right angle here, and then just bring that into the waist and then curve that off. So that's just going to make it a nicer shape so that it sits nicely on the body. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out and then we'll be ready to sew. Here we are. We have our skirt cut out. Whilst it was still folded, I went ahead and pinned it down both sides just to make it a little bit easier. You don't have to pin, but it can move quite a lot, Scuba. The only other thing that we're going to need for the sewing process is some elastic. Anything from 1/2 to 1 inch will be fine. This is a 3/4, and I've cut this to be 1 inch smaller than Nikki's waist measurement, so that it has a little bit of stretching to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn up. For most Scuba fabrics, you should be able to get away with sewing on a normal machine with a normal needle and with a normal stitch. Because we're sewing vertical seams at the moment, then a standard straight stitch will be fine, but you could also do a triple stitch if you wanted to for a bit of extra reinforcement. It's always worth testing before you start with any jersey fabric, Scuba included. Just test how it sews on your machine. If you get some skip stitches, then it might be worth you switching to a ballpoint or stretch needle. And if your straight stitch doesn't seem to be working that well, then you could go to either a stretch stitch if your machine has one, which is the one that looks like a little lightning bolt. If not, you could go for a very small and narrow zigzag. That will do the same job. And any other stretch stitches that your machine might have, like a triple stitch or a triple zigzag, anything like that. So I'm now going to go ahead and sew both sides with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we've sewn both sides. So we can turn it through now.
Excited!
And you can see that we have the start of a pencil skirt.
Lovely.
So the next job is to attach the elastic. So the first thing that we need to do is to actually close the ends to make a loop. So the quickest and easiest way to do that is to bring the two elastic ends together. And then I'm on a triple stitch at the moment. I'm going to leave it on that. I'm just going to sew across the elastic. Triple stitch is like it's doing back stitches all the way, so I know it's going to be nice and strong. So that's sewn the elastic together, and now just to keep those ends nice and flat, I'm going to fold them down and I'm just going to stitch it again. So now it's nice and flat and nice and strong. So now I need to attach the elastic, but before I do that, I want to divide it into 4/4. So I've already got my seam, that gives me my first reference point. So I'm going to fold the elastic in half, and using my marker, I'm just going to mark a line on the opposite to the seam. So that gives me half. And then I'm going to bring those two marks together, and I'm going to make marks either side. So I've now divided my elastic into 4/4. I need to do the same with the skirt, but I'm not going to mark that. I'm just going to bring my two side seams together so that I can find the other quarters, and I'm going to mark those with a pin. So now the skirt's in 4/4 as well. And we're going to take the elastic and we're going to lay it on the right side of the fabric. So I'm going to take my centre back seam, which is, there's no centre back seam on this skirt, but the centre back of the elastic, and I'm going to position that on the pin that's on the middle of one of my sections. And then I'm going to pin that so that the elastic is right on the edge of the Scuba fabric on the right side. Then I'm going to take my next mark and I'm going to align that over the seam and pin that in place. And then I'm going to turn it again, line up my next mark with my pin, and finally chosen little pins for this only because I don't like the big pins for this, they seem to get in the way. Now you'll notice that the elastic is slightly smaller, so I will need to stretch it in certain places to get it to sit nice and flat, but it's only slightly smaller, so it's not a lot of stretching required. I'm now going to attach that with a zigzag stitch. It needs to be a zigzag stitch this time, because if it was a straight stitch, this needs to actually stretch to get on and off you. So a straight stitch, your stitches would just snap. So it needs to be a zigzag stitch this time. And I'm going to do my zigzag stitch right on the edge to attach the elastic. So the waistband is attached. And now the final thing to do is the hem, and to do that, because Scuba doesn't fray at all, in fact most jerseys don't, then all I need to do is to turn it once. I'm going to turn it about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to stitch that in place. So here we are, here's Nikki in her lovely new pencil skirt. Doesn't it look awesome?